Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished professional from Singapore, currently speaking to us from Toronto, Canada, Yolanda Lee. Yolanda, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yolanda is the founder and CEO of Uncommon, a platform where the world's top female talent come to connect and level up. And interestingly, she has lived and worked in every single continent with the exception of South America. So Yolanda, let me start by asking you, what took you to so many different continents and what were some of your learnings?
Yeah, happy to share. I would say that, first of all, it was definitely not planned out. I was born here in Toronto, Canada, to a really modest immigrant family that really instilled the values of hard work, self-determination to me. And the first flight I took, which was only when I was 11 years old, I remember coming home from that flight and thinking I wanted to move abroad, but I didn't really know how this was going to happen. Throughout my career, I really spent, I think, the lens, particularly in my early 20s, early 30s, being guided by growth opportunities. So when not necessarily job title, not status, and not the things that would make my parents happy. This meant that I was going to kind of continue to expand my comfort zone. So firstly, I moved to the UK, actually working in the music industry. I moved to London on a gap year when I was still 19 years old. Moved to London. Then I studied in both the UK and in Europe for university, and thought I was at that time going to kind of work for the UN and the World Bank. I was doing my grad school research in Kenya, and that really excited me. Really seeing technology as a force that could transform lives and a force for good. So when I got my first job offer working for the German startup incubator called Rocket Internet, I moved to West Africa. So I worked across West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, and then joined Uber in Kenya and South Africa, and then eventually moving to Southeast Asia, working for Deliveroo, an Amazon-backed startup that does food delivery. So yeah, that was a little bit my trajectory, but always saying yes to these growth opportunities.
Fantastic. And from someone who was working as a senior professional, what made you become an entrepreneur?
Good question. I think I always had that dream of building my own company. With working in early stage tech companies, I saw I was doing it for other people. And I think it was a great experience because you really build a company from the ground up. You make your mistakes, you learn how to assemble fantastic teams. But then when push came to shove, I think I got to a point where I had the appetite for risk, where I saw a problem that I had experienced firsthand, and was at the stage of my life where I wanted to make that leap. And so that is really, I think, what instilled me with the kind of confidence to go out and build my own company.
Fabulous. So let's talk about Uncommon. Tell me a little bit about this venture and your motivation to start it.
Yeah, sure thing. Uncommon's really born out of my own experience as a female leader in tech companies. The more senior I got, the more lonely it became because women start to kind of disappear as you get to more senior levels. It's actually very hard to find other women who really understand that what you're going through and are at that level of seniority. It's very easy to give back, to talk on panels, to mentor younger women. In simple terms, Uncommon is a private network built for senior female leaders. We're on a mission to see more women making decisions and in those decision-making positions. Just 8% of Fortune 500 companies have a female CEO. Wow. There's actually more Fortune 500 CEOs named Michael than there are women. So
That's amazing.
We wanted to work with women before they drop off the leadership pipeline. So kind of early 30s to 40s, senior manager to vice president levels. We equip them with kind of an inner circle, a personal advisory board, group coaching, and a variety of kind of workshop and community activities as well. We really
Fabulous.
try to create opportunities at scale,
Mhm.
and do so through a number of activities.
Wow. And my logical question, I'm sure you've been asked this. Why have you restricted it for women?
Yeah, no, this is a good question. I think it's kind of a broader question around, relevance and networks. Like, why do industries sometimes have their own networks? Because of relevance. Why do, CEOs have their own networks? It's because of relevance. And the same goes for senior women. There's a unique set of kind of challenges that they face, and being able to really solve it in a focused way. If we try to be everything to everyone, then we're nothing to no one. So
Correct.
we really want to make people feel like they belong, and there is a very deep human need for connection and belonging, and we're targeting the largest demographic of underserved workers in the world, which are women, who for a variety of reasons don't really feel like they belong always in the most senior positions.
Fabulous. And for our, women viewers and listeners, and we have a large number, albeit young, what would you say are some of the challenges senior women leaders face that you are addressing through Uncommon?
Yeah, I'm happy to share that. There's a kind of a range of issues that are the intersection, I really believe, of personal and professional. So, a big one that I see emerge is this sense of you can only be what you can see, and a lot of women, female leaders really lack role models, and so not necessarily having models or people who they can look up to in their industry, in their company. That's something that makes it kind of hard to follow a playbook. The second big challenge is that a lot of women, not all, but choose to start families, and workplaces are really not designed, or at least the workplaces that we live in are not really designed to always support women through these life stages and through these changes. There are some great, fantastic employers who do, but learning how to navigate that, learning how to navigate the identity of both being a leader and a mother, this can bring up a lot of challenges and a lot of trade-offs, and that's definitely another area as well. And secondly, it's just facing, working in a world where that was really designed, and a workplace that was often really designed for men, and women having to face a lot of different biases, face a lot of unique challenges in those spaces as well.
Very interesting. And one of the things that you also mentioned in Uncommon is that this is a great place for women or female talent to come and connect and level up. How important is networking for each one of us, professionally and personally?
Yeah. I personally, I really believe that networking is incredibly important, because the best network is a constellation of opportunities. According to LinkedIn, women have nearly 40% weaker networks based on kind of the strength and the breadth of their networks. And what does that really mean? Weak networks create less opportunities, and less opportunities create less economic opportunities, whether that's promotions, getting in on investments, decision making, and overall that impacts kind of economic outcomes for individuals, companies, and society at large as well. And so there is that kind of old adage around it's not what you know but who you know, and that becomes increasingly more important.
Very interesting. My next question to you is that in today's highly interconnected world, where there are so many different social media networks, what is the role social media plays in building communities?
Yeah, happy to answer this. So social media, I'm not actually a big social media user personally. I believe social media, it brings, it's really about what you go into social media with and what your intention is. I think it gets a lot of negative negative press,
Yeah.
but if used intentionally, it can be really valuable. I think social media, across all the platforms, there's some like TikTok, which really target younger individuals. You have Instagram, etc. But whatever the platform is, I think social media can help in finding one's tribe. Whether you're someone who's really into live action role playing of 15th century battles, you can find that tribe through social media and create that belonging. Yeah, so I recently experienced that. For instance, I found out I had a benign tumor in my uterus and felt incredibly lonely and scared, and social media was actually an incredible place to find other people who had gone through what I went through, who could kind of demystify some of the the challenges that I was kind of facing with something like that. So these micro communities, I think, is what's really exciting about social.
Amazing. And when it comes to the community that you have formed at Uncommon, do you have physical meetings? Are there online meetings? What are the kind of things that you talk about?
Yeah, so we are a hybrid model. So we definitely adapted a lot throughout the pandemic, but what we see is a hybrid model works best. So we do have physical meetings. I think after the pandemic, this idea of physical connection we really value it. But there are a lot of exciting opportunities that come with virtual as well. We can bring in incredible speakers. We can connect people from outside of a local market. So that has been really fantastic for us as well.
Amazing.
So the sort of subjects we talk about, really a kind of range. We've talked about everything from negotiating maternity leave to having a dual ambition career with a partner. We've talked about strategic planning and negotiation. So we have kind of more business school like course subjects as well, and then a lot around kind of the personal development. How do you build your own brand? How do you understand your values? How do you bring those to life in your career as well?
Fascinating. So Yolanda, now let me move to the next segment of our conversation, which is on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's one of the areas that you are addressing through Uncommon as well. My first question to you is, there is a lot of talk about inclusion all over the world. How much is actually happening on the ground?
Yeah, great question. So I'll kind of start from the place of positivity, that there are more, and specifically, diversity, equity, inclusion covers a range of channels. We focus particularly on gender diversity and inclusion, but I can say from our standpoint, there are more professional working women than there ever have been in history. There's more women graduating from university, more women starting businesses. But the flip side, and to your point, the gap in earnings between men and women has narrowed substantially over over the past decades, but progress has really slowed lately. And women working full time still earn about 17% lower for the same job. So that being said, progress has slowed, but I still really believe in the progress that we've seen, and I still think I have a much better working life than say my mother did. What we need to move forward is a slightly different playbook than what we've been using thus far. Yeah.
Okay, and I've spoken to many leaders like you on DEI. My question to you is that, how do we remove biases within society and businesses?
Yeah. A good place to start is by acknowledging that we all have biases. I have bias, even though I have many biases, even though, I'm a woman of color and I do this work, I still have biases. And I think starting from that place of acknowledging that is really important. Secondly, it's acknowledging that the fact that workplaces were designed with underrepresented groups as a bug, not a feature,
Mm-hmm.
and our modern workplace is still largely based on the structure of the workplaces we had from the Industrial Revolution, really designed for cisgender heterosexual men that clock in at 5 o'clock and clock in at 9, clock out at 5. That's really makes a lot of sense for the assembly line, but less for kind of the service economy, the information economy, and what we currently live in. So I really think that we're in the midst of the greatest upheaval of the workplace since the post-war period, when we saw kind of women enter the workplace en masse. And this means we can design a more inclusive workplace. A more inclusive workplace means, everyone learning to be comfortable with difference. One of the things that keep me up at night is that we're really losing our ability to be comfortable with difference, because we live in these kind of echo chambers where and so the way businesses can be better at this is and society is having more compassion, learning to have more compassion for different people's experiences. And this is a lot harder sometimes for people from dominant groups, because we're not always used to seeing our experience reflected, or we're used to seeing our experience reflected, but this isn't necessarily, it makes it harder to kind of see other people's experiences. So getting really comfortable with difference is the first part. The harder part is going a little bit deeper and understanding, why are we uncomfortable with difference? Why does that trigger something within us? And the answer is often some sort of unspoken insecurities. If I acknowledge that I have privilege, does that somehow mean that I haven't worked very hard, for instance? And so that sort of shuts down the conversation. Yeah.
And what about legislation? In India, for example, there is a law which says that 1/3 of every corporate board has to be women. Do you think that can help if the legislation is enacted in many more countries?
That's an interesting one. I think from the data I have seen on these sort of laws, I believe France might have one, if I'm not mistaken, is that from an outcomes perspective, this does shift it, and this idea, my preference actually is to have legislation like this really be not necessarily outcome driven, but process driven. So looking at, okay, you need this many women in the final round, like that has actually shown to have, as positive of an outcome for something like that. Because what I would like to kind of caveat, because what often comes up with discussions around this is that, okay, well, are we moving away from merit? And nobody, I think, no woman, no person of color ever wants to feel like they're there because of the color of the skin, because they're ticking a box. That's a horrible feeling. And so how can we get to a place where, yes, we need to improve the pipeline, but so as some companies I know, for instance, have to have X number of women or underrepresented groups in the final round. So you're still choosing the very best candidate, whoever that is, but you have to work a little bit harder to get people into that final round, or find people in unconventional, uncommon spaces. And so yes, I believe that we don't make as much progress if we're not tracking metrics, and we need that. But I'm very mindful of doing so in a way that that doesn't also recreate and reinforce this idea that that women aren't necessarily up to scratch for this.
Absolutely, well said. I have time for two more questions. My next question to you, Yolanda, is that for a person like you who's lived and worked in so many diverse countries with multiple cultures, I'd love to get your perspective on the impact culture has on DEI. I mean, for example, in some countries, even driving has only been permitted a few years ago.
Mhm.
So how does culture impact diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah. Um, this is a great question, and it's something I witness, yeah, across all the different countries I've lived and worked in. To me, diversity, equity, inclusion, it's not about taking the box. Do you have this many,
Yep.
women, this many, et cetera, et
Mm.
cetera. It's really about structures of power and hierarchies that within a society and culture, and
Mhm.
it's not always the same. So no society, I think, has really managed to not have different kind of hierarchies within their society. Every society is kind of governed by different structures of power, people who are privileged, people who are not. And so, yes, while it does differ, and how the level of discrimination and oppression can really differ country to country, culture to culture. It I really believe there's still a lot of similarities across it. And it all kind of boils back down to that point around dealing with difference, about being able to take perspective of different people. And personally, from on the culture standpoint, I really believe that as humans we have so much more in common than we do in kind of what divides us. And that's definitely one thing I've learned from living in a lot of different countries.
Absolutely.
And I think everywhere, learning how to hold space for that difference is really what's going to kind of take us to the next level.
Fascinating. And my last question to you, and this for the many, many young people who will listen to our conversation, what would your advice be to a young woman starting off on her journey in the corporate world or as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Great one. Okay. Firstly, always very simple, always negotiate your first offer. Okay. I did not negotiate my first offer, and I found out, I think a colleague who had less experience, was paid 50% more than me. So always negotiate your first offer, as a general rule. Secondly, from the beginning, think about building an advisory board for yourself. Think about where you want to be, and you might not know that. Nobody really knows in the beginning, but surround yourself with people. Find people that you can have, loose conversations with, who you find interesting, who you find fascinating. LinkedIn is an incredible resource for this. I'm really impressed by how many young people reach out to me. I'll generally always grab that kind of first coffee with someone, and so use the tools that you have to build advisors. So maybe someone who you really look up to on work-life balance, someone else that you think their financial acumen is incredible, and just having those differing perspectives will really help you as you create as you kind of face different forks in the road in your career.
Very interesting. Yolanda, on that note, and your amazing advice of always negotiate your first offer and build an advisory board for yourself. Thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me at such length about your own journey, about what went into building Uncommon. And it seems to be a very interesting platform that you are giving to women to be able to connect and level up, as you say. Thank you also for speaking to me about DEI and your thoughts on how the world seems to be changing in the right direction. Thank you again, and good luck.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.